There are two resurrections. In Daniel chapter 12 verse 2 it says, "And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt." Two resurrections. Jesus himself said in John chapter 5:28, "Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come forth. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation." Two resurrections. We'll go to one more, Acts 24:15. "I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust." Two resurrections. So there's a resurrection of the just and a resurrection of the unjust. So this episode of this series on God's justice and God's judgments, we're just talking about the first resurrection. This is the resurrection of the just, those who are believers and followers of Jesus Christ. Now, back in the New Testament day, in the early church days, Herod built a throne that resembled the throne at Caesarea. And the reason he did this was so that he could watch the Olympic Games and give rewards to those who won their events. So when they won their event, he'd give them a garland around their head. And those who didn't win were still honoured as a participant. Now, the Greek word for that judgment seat is the word Bema, B-E-M-A, Bema seat. That's the original Greek language. Now, Paul takes up this thought of the Bema seat and the giving out of rewards, and he applies it to kingdom realities. He applies it to the first resurrection. In 2 Corinthians 5:10, he says this, "We must all appear before the judgment seat," that's Bema seat, "we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad." Now, Paul shows us what this means, and he amplifies it so that we can understand this more in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 9 to 15. So he starts with saying that we are God's body, and he talks about that Paul himself, as one of the original apostles, laid a foundation. And in verse 12 he says this, "If anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay and straw, each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it." Now, what day will declare it? That's the resurrection. That's the first resurrection day. That's the judgment day, the first resurrection. Because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss. But he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. So, in the first resurrection, on this particular judgment day, this is not about salvation, because that was settled at Calvary in Christ. The Bema seat judgment, or the first resurrection, or the day of judgment at the first resurrection, this is about reward for service as illustrated in the Olympic Games. The winners were assembled, they received the victor's crown, and some didn't get the victor's crown, but they were still honoured. So at this Bema seat judgment, all of our works that we've ever done will be tested by fire. Now, all those things that we do for Christ in his name with a heart that is for him. In other words, all the works that we do that aren't about us and making ourselves look good, but are about glorifying God and building his kingdom, and that are done in obedience to him, when they are tested by fire, what will be left is gold, silver, precious stones, and a reward will be given accordingly. Now, what will those rewards look like? We don't know. We don't know everything about God. We're called to worship God, not understand everything, even though he does explain many things to us in his word and by his Spirit, but not everything. And so it is with these rewards. We don't know what they look like. But all we do is just keep obeying God, do what he says, and keep working for the kingdom. Now, the works that we do for ourselves that were not done in his name, they will be burnt like wood, hay, stubble. There will be nothing there. But you will still be saved. You still have your salvation. Okay, because why? Because we're saved by grace, not by the works we do. The first resurrection is a reward for the works we do. Okay, so every day is an opportunity to live like him, to live for him. And here's something that we don't talk about much, but I think it's important that we get this. The maturity that you have at death ripples on into eternity. Your maturity in Christ does not get burnt up at the Bema seat judgment, at that first resurrection, but continues with your reward. Isn't that wonderful? So at the resurrection, all the saints will get different glories. Some will have the glory of the sun. Some will have the glory of the moon. Some will have the glory of the stars. But what determines our resurrection glory? What determines that is the measure of our obedience to the measure of light that we have.